Am I on? All right. Good evening. Is everybody excited to be here? Oh, you can do better than that. All right. Now, this is going to be interactive tonight, right? So, just getting you warmed up. So, this is the last of the summer series. It's called Joseph's Brothers Come to Egypt. Now, there's been a lot of good lessons, right? This summer has been great. I've got big shoes to fill, but God will get me through it. All right, so we got 4 chapters. Now, I didn't think that was broad enough, so we're going to expand it just a little bit tonight. We're going to go back and set the stage, get the backstory. You know, some of this is going to be probably a little redundant after all the good lessons we've had, but hopefully we'll come to a conclusion and get to the topic before the end of the class. So, let me get this turned on. Yep, that works. All right, who can tell me how many wives did Jacob have? Did I hear 4? Yeah, 4 is right. That's right. And how many children did he have? 13. Yeah, good. And how many of those were boys? 12. That's right. That's a lot of boys. I've got 2. I can't imagine having 12. So I'm sure it was a lively household. And we're going to look at that in a little bit. So here we go. This tells us the order of the boys and how they relate to the mothers, right? So the first 4, Reuben through Judah, are Leah's. She was the first wife, right? And who was the second wife? Rachel, that's right. And she was barren, right? Was that a good thing for her? Was she happy about that? No. So after the 4 sons, what did Rachel do? Does anybody remember? Gave her handmaid. Which one was it? You remember? Bilhah, that's right. All right, so she gave Jacob another wife. That's just what he needed, right? Because he didn't have enough trouble between the 2, right? All right, so then she had 2 sons, right? And then Leah, she was barren, or she stopped having kids, right? So what did she do? Not to be outdone by Rachel, gave her a handmaid to Jacob, and so now he's got 4 wives. Poor guy. All right, so there's only one girl, that's Dinah, and she was born right before Rachel started to have children. Okay? Joseph was the oldest of Rachel's children. Okay? So this is where we're going to get started. All right? All right, so the brothers were in conflict. I can't imagine why. Maybe you guys can enlighten me a little bit. Why might they be in conflict? Jealousy, yep. Mm-hmm. What else? Favoritism, yep. Boys are boys, that's right. Yep. Anything else? What was that? Not enough food. Okay, that comes later, but yeah, that's right. Anything else? Inheritance, yeah, good. All right, so here's some of the things that I'm going to go through tonight. It's not an all-encompassing list, but the history of family strife and dysfunction. Now, was this just related to Jacob and his wives? No, this is generational, right? Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Esau, Abraham and Sarah, Hagar. By the way, who was the the second wife of Abraham? Does anybody remember? Keturah, that's right. Very good. She doesn't get much face time, as we say, but she came after Hagar, right? Who was never actually a wife. Okay? Jacob also loved Rachel and her sons more. Why was that? Why was Rachel so important to Jacob? Yeah. So who was he working for at the time? Laban, that's right. And what did Laban do? He tricked him, that's right. And why was he at Laban's anyway? Because he was a relative, right? But yet there was mistrust and shady dealings, right? All right. So we'll get into more of that later on. Joseph was also a dreamer, okay? How did this play into it? We'll look at that later. And Joseph's work responsibilities. Now this is a little bit strange perhaps, but I think it'll become apparent when we get there. All right, so let's go back to the start of our journey to Egypt, because that's what this is about, right? Getting to Egypt. All right, where did the journey start? Does anybody remember? Yeah, okay, let's go back a little further. Remember, I'm talking generational here. Ur of the Chaldees, that's right. Oh, we got God's will and purpose too. All right, so Ur of the Chaldees is right down here in the bottom, and Canaan is over here. Now, how did they get from Ur to Canaan? Who was it that left? What's that? Abraham. But who was it actually that led the family out of there? Who was Abraham's father? Terah, that's right. Does anybody remember the brothers? No, Abraham was the one we're talking about. So it's Nahor and Heron, right? So Heron died in the Ur of the Chaldees before the journey took place. But Lot was Heron's son, right? So he went with him. So they traveled, and they went to Heron. And for some reason, Terah decided to stop. Doesn't tell us why, but he did. And what happened in Heron? Does anybody remember? God came to Abraham, but what happened before that? Terah died, right? So Terah came, stopped, and they settled, and he eventually died. Okay? Heron's already dead. That just leaves Abraham and Nahor. Okay? All right, so you mentioned God came to Abraham and called him to go on with the journey to Canaan, right? Okay, so that's where we got to Canaan. Okay? So let's move on, and we'll go with the history, the generational history. So Abraham and Sarah, they had a loving relationship. There wasn't any dysfunction there, was there? No? Can anybody give me examples of family contention or strife with Abraham and Sarah? And I realize that's not their names at the start of the story, but it's too hard to switch in the timeline. Yes, ma'am.
He lied about her being his wife.
That's right. So when he went down to Egypt, he told Pharaoh what? That his sister. Was that true? Yes and no, right? What was she really? She's a half-sister, that's right. So it was deceptive for sure, but in essence, it was true. Now, why did he do that? Fear, yeah. She was beautiful, right? He was definitely afraid that Pharaoh was going to take over. So he thought this was the answer. So we know the story. Pharaoh goes for her because she's beautiful, right? And then he finds out through a vision, right, that he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, right? So he goes back and kicks Abraham out of the country, right? He's not happy about it. Okay, so Abraham goes back to Canaan. So what else in the family history can you guys think of that would be contentious? She was. Now this is a theme, right? Sarah was barren. Rachel was barren. Rebekah was also barren. This is interesting, right? We'll get to that later too. Okay, what else? All right, here's a few of the things that I came up with. So Abraham leaves his family behind, as in Nahor, and the settled family at Haran. We mentioned the half-sister. Abraham and Lot eventually separate. Now this was a success story, right? I mean, they're just too wealthy, and they can't all survive at the same place. But how does that work? Abraham gives Lot the choice. Lot chooses what? The plains, right? The good land. And it's near what? Which city? Sodom. All right, so he eventually goes to Sodom, and we know that story. Okay. Let's see. Sarah's barren. We mentioned that. Sarah gives Hagar to Abraham to get a son. Right? So she gets tired of, she knew that God promised this, but she gets tired of waiting, right? And how long was it between the promise and when Hagar was born? Hagar gave birth to Ishmael. It's like 15, 13, something like that. It's a long time. And how much longer did Sarah have to wait before she gave birth? What's that? 25 total. That's right. So that's a long time. So needless to say, she got impatient, you know. And an impatient woman, Abraham's like, hey, whatever, right? So he accepts Hagar, not as a wife, but as a concubine. Okay, and they bear a son. His name is Ishmael. That's right. Okay, as soon as Hagar gives birth, what does she do? She despises Sarah because she's barren, right? Now, Sarah takes this well, right? No. Sarah treats Hagar very harshly, and Hagar runs away, right? And Ishmael is at odds from there on out with Isaac. God says that he will bless both boys, right? But they will be at odds. Okay, and I'm not reading any of the verses because there's a lot of stuff, and you guys can look that up if you like. All right, so we'll move on to, one more. Sarah eventually kicks Hagar out, and Abraham's like, hey, she's your handmaid, do what you like, right? And it's almost word for word. It is a paraphrase, though. All right, contention between Jacob and Esau, Isaac and Rebekah. What do you guys think? It's all good there? No? Favoritism, yeah. What kind of favoritism did you see?
One and the other prefer the other.
That's right. So who preferred Esau?
Mama.
No,
That was Dad.
That was Dad. That's right. That was Isaac. And obviously Mama took the other side, right? She loved Jacob. So why did Rebekah love Jacob more, and why did Isaac love Esau more? Does anybody know?
Esau was a good hunter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he
He brought him meat, right? And as any good father knows, meat is good. I eat a little bit too much, but I love the meat. All right, so that's why he loved Esau. One of the reasons, right? And why did Rebekah? Does anybody remember? Sorry, over here?
I was going to say Jacob was a mama's boy.
I think that's true. He certainly wasn't an outdoorsman, that's for sure. He stayed in the tents, right? What was the comment over here?
He stayed home.
Yes, he stayed home. Mm-hmm. What happened before the birth? Yes.
They tied a ribbon around the first one
Right.
And that was
Right. And who came out first?
Esau physically came out first, but the hand was Jacob that came out.
That's right. So there was contention even in the womb, right? And it even says they contended in her womb, right? So that wasn't good. But what did God say to Rebekah before the birth? Excuse me?
Older will serve the younger.
Yes. All right. And told her that she was going to give birth to two boys, right? And that there would be two nations, and is exactly right. Okay. Anything else you guys can think of? What was that?
It's still going on today.
Yes, the contention goes on today, doesn't it? And that's the sad part. All right, so here's some of the things that I found, and then, like I said, these are not all inclusive, and then you may think of others and just shout them out if you find them. All right, so Rebekah was told by God that Esau would serve Jacob. All right, Jacob holds Esau's heel, kind of talking about the birth, like you were talking about, Matt. Jacob steals Esau's birthright. Now, this is one we didn't mention. How did he do this? He tricked him. That's right. Right? Yeah. So with the birthright, it wasn't really a trick, was it? He was coerced more. Esau was what? He was out and he was starving, right? Supposedly. And he wanted some stew. And so Jacob's like, hey, you want stew? I'll give you stew. What do I get in return? I want the birthright. Yeah. And it even says that Esau despised his birthright, right? So he gave it up easily. And he wasn't too upset about that. Now, the next one, though, is the blessing. This is the one where the trickery came in. What happened there? Esau was out to get some venison, right? Or some meat for Jacob. And what did Rebekah tell Jacob to do? Yeah, okay. So she even helped set up this, right? And she told him how to do it. So mother was scheming a bit, and Jacob was more than willing to do it, right? So he goes in, he gets the blessing, long story short, right? And then Esau comes back. Was he happy? No. So the blessing was way more important to him than the birthright. That's interesting to me, right? Because the birthright is what? The inheritance, right? You would think that would be really big, but he really wanted that blessing. He even did what? He begged, right? Right. He didn't want the burden, right? Yeah, he probably, that's probably right. He probably wanted the freedom to go hunt and do what he wanted instead of staying back and taking care of everybody. Okay. So, we mentioned Isaac prefers Esau, Rebekah prefers Jacob. Now, Esau is really upset at this point. So what happens? Rebekah sends him off to where? Yeah, that's right. Her brother Laban, who lives in Heron, back where they started, right? Where they stayed in mid-flight, right? Was it really to find a wife? Probably. But what was the real reason? Esau was not happy. And she wanted to give him some time to cool off. Did he eventually cool off? Yes. Yeah, and they reconciled, right? But, so there was a lot of strife, a lot of stuff going on. Okay? Let's see. All right. Let's move on to Jacob and his wives. Now, there's not much material here, right? Yeah. No family strife or conflict, right? What do you guys think? Well, don't fail me now. You guys have been doing great. All right. So Leah and Rachel, sorry. Did they get along? No. Why did they not get along?
He didn't really want her.
Right.
She wasn't favored in any way.
Exactly.
So she was probably jealous in that regard.
For sure.
purchased you with my mandrakes and all of that.
Right. Yeah, we'll get to that one in a little bit. So Rachel, I keep saying that Rebecca. Rachel was the angel, right? I'm sure she didn't rub it in at all that Jacob loved her more, right? But Rachel was also, he was tricked we mentioned that he was tricked by Laban, okay? But Rachel was also very upset about being barren, right? So that is a huge thing for wives at this time, to be able to provide heirs, children in the marriage, right? So it's very interesting that God chose 3 wives in a row that were barren. Sarah first, then Rebecca, then Rachel. Okay, what else was contentious about this family? Okay, we'll just go through a few that I thought of. So Jacob loved Rachel and worked in total 14 years for her. I mean, you got to love someone to work 14 years, basically as a slave, right? Now, he came away with it pretty well. God blessed him, right? Okay.
But after he got married to her, instead of stopping, he kept going out every day and keep working for another person.
That's right, instead of being a husband, right? Yeah, I'm sure that's a big factor in the strife between the two wives. So Laban also tries to cheat Jacob in his wages, right? Does anybody remember how that worked out and how that turned into a good thing for Isaac? I mean, sorry, for Jacob.
Herd and based on color.
That's right. So, it was speckled and striped, and then, everything that, Laban could think of that was going to be in his favor, God turned it on its head and blessed Jacob, right? Okay. But there's still that bickering and cheating and lying, right? All right. Rachel stole Laban's household idols. Does anybody remember that story? So they snuck off in the middle of the night, right? That wasn't very cool. They didn't say goodbye, right? So what happened? Laban just goes, good riddance. No, he chased him down, right? And what does he accuse him of? Stealing these idols, right? Well, first he was like, it's not very cool that you ran off. I didn't even get to say goodbye to my daughters. But that wasn't really his purpose. It was these idols, right? And where were the idols? Did he find them? That's right. And who was sitting on that? So Rachel was the one that stole them. And she kept them safe even during the interrogation and the rifling of the tents, right? So they got away with the household idols. I'm sure that didn't sit well with Laban, but Rachel was happy. Okay, Rachel was barren. Leah was fertile. We mentioned that. Rachel gives Bilhah. We mentioned that. Then Leah reciprocates with Zilpah. And here you mentioned the mandrakes. So Rachel actually sold Jacob's bed. She said, yeah, go sleep with him, right? I just need those mandrakes, right? I'm not sure. I didn't do the research. Does anybody know what the big deal about the mandrakes were? Yeah, I don't remember either, but I'm sure it must have been important, right? Because Leah didn't want to part with it, But it may have just been the bickering too. Yeah, I'm not going to give you my mandrakes. I want your mandrakes, right? All right. Anyway, there's definitely contention in the house. Okay. So that kind of gets through the family history. This is a wonderful place to be, right? If you're a child. No reason that you would pick up on any of the contention and continue it, right? All right. So let's move on to Jacob and his love for Rachel. Yes, go ahead.
Also within the brothers, though, Reuben
Yeah.
And let's go back and look, but if it was, that's an issue too.
Yes, for sure.
It doesn't matter, it's an issue anyway. But
Yes.
It's a double issue in that.
Exactly.
It's building on the strife.
Yes, and there's probably a dozen more examples that I didn't pull out. But thank you. That's wonderful. All right, so Jacob's love for Rachel and her sons. All right, how does this add to the contention, and what are some sources of this? We've talked about a lot of it before. Any comments here? Okay, so Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah from that verse. I mean, it actually states it, so it's not just an assumption. Jacob loved Joseph because he was born in his old age, right? And was the firstborn son of Rachel. He waited a long time for a son from Rachel, right? So that was one of the reasons, and that's stated in that verse as well. All right? And then Jacob, it's not just, okay, I love him more, I'm going to hide it. No, he gives him what? A coat of many colors. Right? This is very garish, right? This is out there, right? And does Jacob hide it away, treasured thing that he keeps in his chest? No, he wears it everywhere he goes, right? When he went out to see his brothers, what was he wearing? The coat of many colors. Now, they said they saw him a long way off. How could you recognize someone a long way off? Because nobody else was wearing a coat of many colors. I'm sure the clothing back then was mostly drab, right? But this was extravagant. Not exactly an endearment to any of the brothers, right? All right. And then Jacob could not part with Benjamin when the brothers went to Egypt because he was, in his mind, the only son left. Now, it didn't turn out that way, but he's like, no, I'm not getting rid of, Rachel's only son, my only son by Rachel. Okay. All right, Joseph and his dreams. Now, this didn't cause any contention, I'm sure. There's no jealousy and status struggles between brothers, right? So, what were the dreams that Joseph dreamed? Does anybody remember? We've gone through them, but just quickly. And that the first one was what? It was sheaves, right? And his sheaves stood upright, and his brothers bowed down. Now with this one, it was just the brothers, right? That's interesting. Why was there two visions? Or not visions, dreams, sorry.
And stars.
Yes.
Included the parents.
That's right. So the parents were included in this. And how did Jacob take that? He didn't like it. He rebuked him. He said, what, are your father and mother going to bow down to you? Come on. I mean, I know I've treated you pretty special, but not that special. Right? And so what did it say in that scripture? It said that he kept it in mind. So what does that remind you of? Who else kept something in mind? Yes, very good. So something was turning over in his head, right? So he kept that in mind. So we've got the dream of the sheaves and the dream of the celestial bodies, the sun, moon, and stars. And Joseph, he's not sheepish about this, right? He tells them boldly, right? He's not concerned that they're unhappy with him. So why do you think he was so bold about this? What's that?
Little brothers do that.
Little brothers do that, yeah. They try to push the buttons of the older ones. Okay, that could be it. That could be it. What else? What was that?
Confident.
Yeah, he was confident. That's right. And why was he so confident?
Yes, he had God on his side.
Right. So he's had his way every time that anything came up, I would imagine. Right? He's been preferred. He's been He's showing off in front of his brothers. Okay, so Jacob chastised him. We talked about that, but he kept it in mind. Okay, let's move on. Joseph work responsibilities. Now this may be a little odd. Jacob was younger. How old was he when he was sent off to Egypt? He was 17, right? So he was a little young, but back then they worked hard, right? Mostly. But did Jacob go out with the brothers to tend the flocks? No, he didn't. And why would that be? I'm sure some. Yeah, go ahead.
He's paid by his father, so he stayed behind.
Right. His father probably didn't want to let him out of his sight, but also he was treated better, right? He probably had, other responsibilities, right? Now, can anybody think of some examples of him and his brothers and the way that work relation worked? I'll give you a hint. The sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. What happened there? Does anybody remember? Yeah, Joseph gave them a bad report. Now, I'm sure that didn't sit well because they were already kind of shunned, I'm sure, being the handmaid wives, right? And the sons of the handmaids. I'm sure their status was already a little bit in doubt, right? But then Joseph goes and gives them a bad report. Okay? So it's conjecture, of course, but it seems like Jacob relied on Joseph to kind of be the supervisor role, right? Be, hey, what are your brothers doing? In fact, when Jacob gets Joseph gets killed, supposedly, but he was actually sold into slavery. What did his father do? He sent him out to see what his brothers were doing, right? Now, he went to Dothan, where he thought they were, and he talked to some guy and said, oh, your brothers are down. I can't remember where they went. Went to another place, right? So he travels there, and then they see him afar off, right? And they start their scheming. What's their thought processes there? Get rid of him, yeah. They're going to kill him. That's right. And why did they end up not killing him? Reuben came to his defense, says, what? Well, they threw him down in a well, right? Hopefully it was dry, but they threw him down in the well. And then they saw what? Caravan. Some relatives, right? Who were they? Ishmaelites, that's right. Descendants of Ishmael. And they were what? They were traders, nomads, right? So they were traveling. And they had from what I hear, they had a route that they ran. And this was just along the route, right? And they were headed down to Egypt. How much did they sell Joseph for? Does anybody remember? Yes, 20 shekels. Now, I don't know what that exactly means, but that's what it said, 20 shekels, at least in my version. Okay, so we've talked about that and the bad report. Does anybody think of any other things in this category that might have caused contention? Okay, so it's welled up, it's been repressed, and it's exploded. They've finally decided, hey, we're going to end this, right? So they're going to kill him. Reuben saves him. They sell him. He goes down to Egypt. What do they do with his nice coat? They rip it up, and they put blood all over it, and they tell Jacob what? That he must be dead. The wild animals got to him, right? So they lied. Surprise, surprise. Okay? So this is how Joseph got there. Now, just want to talk about God's will and purpose in this. where is God's will and purpose in this? Is this just the bad behavior of some brothers? No, absolutely not. Can you guys think of some examples?
Sold him to when he got down to Egypt.
What's that?
So when Joseph was sold by the people that had bought him, they resold him
Right,
into slavery into the Egyptians.
right. To who? Potiphar, that's right. Okay. Anything else? Uh-huh. That's right. So it wasn't just him boasting. God wanted them to know about that, right? Because that led to their anger being fulfilled, right? We'll see that fulfillment of that evil come later as well. So Abraham was also warned that his descendants would be in captivity for 400 years. And this was way before this time, right? So God warns him that they would go to Egypt. And, well, they didn't say Egypt per se. Well, maybe it did. I can't remember. But anyway, in 1512, you can look that up. Okay? God's judgment of Egypt in 1514. All right? So that's part of his purpose. He wanted judgment of Egypt. Abraham's descendants would also become a great and wealthy nation. Were they great and wealthy at this time? They were pretty well off, but they weren't a great and wealthy nation. They were maybe a great and wealthy family, but that's a far cry from a nation, isn't it? So somehow they had to become a nation. How did they get wealthy out of that? Now that
Before they came out of Egypt,
yes.
after the 10th plague,
Yeah.
God put in the hearts of the Egyptians to give them,
Right.
basically give them gold and all kinds of stuff as they were leaving.
Right. So those plagues you mentioned are part of that judgment. So is that redistribution of wealth, right? The Great Reset, right? I won't even go into that. Sophie told me not to get into politics. But anyway, so they're becoming a great and wealthy nation through this process. All right. The Israelites returned to Canaan when? When the Amorite iniquity was complete. So that took a long time, right? And even when they initially set out during the Exodus, what happened? It was another 40 years because they disobeyed, right? So even that was part of God's plan. All right. We mentioned Joseph was sold to Midianites or Ishmaelites for 20 shekels. Now, God provides a 7-year famine, which forces Jacob to buy grain, right? So he's bringing them back together. So what is Joseph's stature? What is his situation at this point? He's second in command. He's the governor of all Egypt. What else? That's right. And why does he have that control? Yes. And that's right. Because he had the dream, he interpreted it, and he set him over the 7 years of good harvest, right? Took him 20% out and storing it for the famine, right? So the brothers are now into the famine, and they're out of grain, so they're going to go to Egypt, okay? Eventually, Joseph acknowledges that God sent him to Egypt to save lives, all right? And that's after his brothers come. So let's quickly get on. I heard the first bell. All right, so Joseph's brothers go to Egypt. Now, it's hard to see, but there's how many trips there? How many journeys to Egypt did the brothers take? 3, that's right. So let's look at the first one. What happened during the first one? This was early in the famine, right? But not early enough that they hadn't run out of grain already, right? So I don't know, what is that, a year in, 2 years in? I don't know. But it's early in the famine.
Joseph recognizes them, sets them up, takes one hostage.
Right.
And then they go.
Right, good. So why does Jacob recognize them and he is not recognized?
Vice king of Egypt.
Right,
We
he's-
sold this kid off to be a slave
Right.
somewhere, you know.
Out of sight, out of mind would be one thing. Yes. Right. He was 17. I'm sure he changed his looks. His stature was one thing. He also used an interpreter, didn't he? So they were speaking in his native language, so he understood it. But he was speaking Egyptian. I don't know what the language was, but using an interpreter, right? So that could be one thing too. So there's a lot of reasons. Oh, that's not good. Oh, there we go. Easily recovered. All right. Jacob sends 10 sons. Why not 11? Benjamin's just too precious, right? All right. Joseph was governor and sold the grain. We talked about that. He's recognized. Joseph accuses them of being spies. Why does he do that? Is he trying to get back at them?
Get Benjamin down.
Yeah, that's right. He wants Benjamin there. Why does he want Benjamin there?
The brother.
His little brother. He loves him. But what else? This is part of God's purpose, right? What was the 10 sheaves dream? All his brothers bowing down by themselves, right? Maybe that's it. But certainly it was God's plan that they all get there. That's right, and that's going to happen a little later. All right, so Joseph demands that they bring Benjamin. We've talked about that. The brothers admit their guilt. Now, they don't admit it to Joseph, but he hears them, right? Because they think that he can't understand them. So they're talking, and you know, this is all happening because of what we did, right? All right, Simeon was kept as a prisoner. You mentioned that. The brothers return to Canaan and find their money in their grain sacks. I'm sure that went over well with their father, right? And that put some fear in them, didn't it? Why did Joseph put the grain back in or the money back in the sacks? What's that? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Take care of it.
To take care of him, that's right. All right, so he's certainly not trying to get revenge, is he? All right. He's got a plan. All right, second journey. Do they go back immediately? No. Why not? Fear, for sure, because of the money in the sacks. What else?
They've been told, don't come back without your little brother.
That's right.
Dad wasn't about to let that happen.
That's right. Yeah. Jacob's like, nah, I mean, you're going to bring me down to the grave, you know, if I lose Benjamin. So no, right? So what changes their mind?
But that doesn't work. And later, Judah basically said, he makes a pledge with his own son.
Yes.
As
Very good.
And they're hungry.
Other things, they were just desperate.
They were hungry, right? They'd waited till the very end, right? They were starting to really get hungry, right? Okay, so let's just quickly go through it. They didn't want to let Benjamin go, but the famine was severe. They had run out of grain. Jacob eventually relents. They took Benjamin and presents. They took a lot of presents, right, on Jacob's recommendation, and double the money that they had brought back and the money for the new grain. Joseph orders that the brothers be taken to his house. And I'm sure oh, wow, he loves us. We're going to his house, you know. We're going to be his guest. Was that the reaction? No, that's right. All right. So Joseph's steward obviously sees their reaction and assures the brothers that they don't need to be afraid. Okay? So Joseph eventually made himself known and wept. He wept when he saw Benjamin. He left and then composed himself and came back. Now, what was the eating situation here? Did he eat with them? No, why not? That's right. That's abhorrent to them, right? It's kind of like Jews and Samaritans. They're not going to be at the same table, right? And plus his stature, I'm sure. Okay, so Joseph sends them back with grain, and what does he do? He puts his silver cup in Benjamin's bag. Again, part of his plan. And I'm sorry I'm rushing through this, but we're running out of time. So Joseph's steward overtakes the brothers and finds the cup and brings them back. All right, Judah intercedes for Benjamin because Joseph says Benjamin has to stay here in prison. Right? And Judah says, no, I vouched for him, I will do this. So that's what happens. Judah stays. Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. Okay? And they cry over each other and hug, and, it's a joyful reunion. Joseph has obviously forgiven them. And he tells them that, there's a reason that I'm here, and that's to save lives, your lives in particular, right? So Joseph gives them cards and silver at the behest of who? Pharaoh. Pharaoh is excited. I mean, Joseph is his wonderkin, right? His governor who, just takes care of everything, right? I mean, Pharaoh doesn't have to do anything other than talk to Joseph every once in a while. So he has it pretty good. But he says, yeah, give them cards and money and send them back and bring your household back. So this is the culmination of getting them all there. So that's going to happen in the final journey, and we'll just go through this. So Jacob is convinced that Joseph is alive and commits the journey to Egypt. And that wasn't an easy job talking him into that, but he eventually concedes. Jacob takes all that he has and stops at Beersheba to offer sacrifices to God. God spoke to Jacob in a vision and reassured him that he was with him and would continue to be, and that he would not remain there. He would not be buried there. What happened with his bones? Right? Actually, his whole body. And they buried him in his family plot at Shechem, right? Okay. Jacob settles in the land of Goshen, which is a wealthy area. It's grasslands. And they're shepherds, right? What do the Egyptians think of shepherds? Not much, right? They're abhorrent again, right? It seems like they're pretty snooty, these Egyptians. But anyway, so they end up in Pharaoh. They end up in Goshen, and Pharaoh actually puts them in charge of his own flocks, which is quite the honor. All right, Joseph strips Egypt and surrounding lands of money, livestock, fields, and the people themselves because of the famine, right? And all of this goes to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh's pretty happy about this. He's becoming the wealthiest in the whole region, right? And everybody runs out of money. They run out of land and livestock, right? And eventually they sell themselves. So Pharaoh literally owns everything, except for the Egyptian priests. And why was that? Because Pharaoh was taking care of them, so that they were exempt from all this famine stuff. All right. So that's Joseph's brothers coming to Egypt. I'm sorry, I kind of rushed through it. Had a bit more than I could chew, right? So I bit off more than I can chew. But hopefully you got something of this. It's the last of the summer season, and I've had a great time.